the numbers are stunning because it is not just from people. It is third, fourth, fifth generation Democrats.
Trump has certainly broken out of the gate very quickly. There's no question about it. If this were a horse race, he would be several lengths ahead of the rest of the field, one furlong into the race.
Welcome to the Fourcast, where four frum pundits talk politics. Meet the all-star lineup.
I'm Benjamin Rose, Mishpacha magazine editor-at-large.
I'm Maury Litwack, Teach Coalition CEO and political insider.
I'm Stu Loser, a longtime Democratic communications strategist.
And I'm Eli Steinberg, conservative commentator.
Okay, so let's get down to politics.
All right, welcome to the Fourcast. This is a special post-election edition for those listeners who've been following throughout the election. Elections are, I don't know how else to explain them. Sometimes I compare them to a football game or for some sporting event. Sometimes it's a marathon, sometimes it's a sprint. It just depends on your analogy that you want to use. But the game is over. It's very clear after this election that it was a red wave. Some of us predicted a red wave. I don't think any of us saw this red typhoon. Unprecedented results, which we're going to talk about at the top of the hour. I think what we want to start and do is that I don't think there's a listener or someone who cares about politics in America who is not opining over the last weeks. If you're a Republican, you're saying, we told you so. This is what we thought was going to happen, and we told you so. And if you are a member of the Democratic Party, you're probably going one of two ways. You're probably either saying to yourself that this is a disaster and there were warning signs and we have to fix the warning signs, or you're saying, look, Reagan won overwhelmingly, and then 4 years later, and then 8 years later, sea change we saw in all of that. And so politics is cyclical, and we'll wait our turn and we'll see what happens. So these are sort of some of the ruminations and other things that are happening here. I, for one, think that I think it's extremely important for the Democratic Party to have sort of a gut check and figure out what went wrong, what went right, etc. And right now, as there's sort of a bipartisan consensus in American political history where I think it was Mitch McConnell said elections have consequences. Nancy Pelosi said something similar as well. The Republicans are riding high. They won. So let's get it and kick it off right off the bat. Let's hear from Stu to start. Stu, what are your post-election thoughts as we go around the horn here?
So I think you're right and wrong, Maury. I think you are right that politics is cyclical. 100% of the time when one party controls all three houses, both houses of Congress and the White House, they end up overplaying their hand. The Democrats have definitely done it. The Republicans have done it. Even when they only have two parties, even when one party only has two of the big three, they overplay their hand. So it is absolutely cyclical in that the Republicans, their danger is doing things that are not what regular Americans want to do, but rather niche core issues that are important for the Republican base. I'm saying this as a Democrat. Do not be overly concerned about niche issues in a base. If you do, you will overplay your hand and there will be a future. I want to get another second if I could, Maury. Disagree with your idea that nobody saw it coming. Because I think listeners to this podcast heard a lot of what was coming. We have talked about time and time again the importance of the immigration issue, how it is the most powerful issue Donald Trump has. I kept on making fun of him, insulting him, pointing out that when he had the chance to hammer Kamala Harris on the border, he didn't in the debate. That was obviously a defining issue. And we talked a lot about split party voting. And as it turns out, as you can see in places where the Democratic Senate candidates overperformed Kamala Harris, and there are places where the Republican candidate underperformed Trump, split ticket voting is still a real thing. Benjamin, you've spoken a lot about this, and you've talked about in your column also, which is the idea that this is not the Democratic Party that you grew up with. This is not the Democratic Party that you once witnessed, etc. Do you think that's part of what happened here?
It's definitely part of what happened here, but I've also talked about how the Democratic voters have turned to the left and to the progressive side of things over the last few years. So I'm not surprised that they came up with a candidate like Kamala Harris, who I don't think was a strong candidate to begin with. And it seems like they're trying to make some moves to the center. You heard Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, who was a definite prospect for 2028 for the Democrats, addressing a pro-Israel rally. I'm not sure that momentum is going to last, but it's a move in the right direction. I do want to add one thing, and I did write this in my column for this week, that back in 1976, after Watergate, Nixon resigned, and Jerry Ford's two mediocre years, in the White House, they had a poll that showed that only 22% of Americans identified with the Republican Party. And people were talking about the Republican Party was dead. 4 years later, guess what? Carter did a lousy job as president from 76 to 80 for the Democrats, and Ronald Reagan came in and he won 489 electoral votes in 1980. So we can't count. But as far as the Republicans and Trump is concerned, he's going full force. He's in 2016, it took him 9 days to make his first cabinet appointment. Now I think he's made about 9 cabinet appointments in his first 7 days. So he's working faster, he's working harder, he's picking people who have the same political ideology as he does. Some of his picks are out of the box. Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense is a bit of a head scratcher. I like Pete. I've interviewed him here when he's been here. Is he going to be able to manage a $1 trillion budget and the whole defense establishment? I'm not sure. I think Elise Stefanik is a fantastic pick for UN ambassador. We don't know about Rubio yet at press time. It seems like he's going to get the nomination, but it hasn't been 100% announced by Trump officially. He's making good picks. He's working hard, and if he accomplishes with the team that he's putting together what the voters expect from him, we might see something that we don't usually see. Normally in the midterms 2026, we would expect the governing party to lose seats in Congress. That might not happen. They might be able to increase their lead if they're able to get their agenda going, and people like the way it's going.
I want to turn over to Eli. Eli, I happen to have here with me my special rose-colored glasses that I wear depending on whether or not there's a red wave or not, right? So there's one way I can look up at it and I can say, okay, this is a red wave and everything is hunky-dory. The other hand, seemingly there's some more of those. There was Senate splits. There were seats that the Republicans should have won that they didn't. The House is extremely close as well. So you can look at it one way, or you can say to yourself, wait a second, from the Republican Party's perspective, was this such an overwhelming success? Is there trouble up ahead? Because I know some of those Senate seats they definitely should have won, and some of those House seats they should have won as well. It shouldn't be as close as it is if there truly was a red wave. So yeah, I'm just wearing the different kinds of glasses I have. Eli, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I have the same rose-colored glasses as you do. It's hard not to be happy after such a performance. I want to say a few things about this election. The first thing that I think we need to understand when we see the results of this election is, I heard Ben Domenech say it on Hewitt. He said, this is a buyer's remorse election. 2020, things were out of control in the country generally, and people looked what was in front of them. They had a promise of, let's put the grown-ups back in charge, and they went for it. Did they get the grown-ups in charge? No, they didn't get the grown-ups in charge. They got a couple of years of kind of insane results. So that's the first thing. The thing that Trump has working for him going forward, we talk about already anticipating. We're very forward-looking here on the Fourcast. We're already looking forward to the midterms, even though he wasn't even sworn in yet. But the thing that he has working for him, which I think previous candidates and previous presidents did not, is Trump's promises were very unambiguous. A lot of times, traditional presidential candidates come in with sort of this fluffy, touchy-feely sort of stuff that they say they're going to do.
Like opportunity economy?
Like opportunity economy, and that kind of thing. But it's very hard for them to turn that into what it is that people want. Trump promised mass deportations. There's not a single person, just to pick one thing as an example, probably what's going to be the most, what you see already, the media is concentrating on, and it's going to be the most controversial part of his plank. He promised that. People know he promised that, and he has no choice but to deliver it. Now, the second thing that also he has going for him is that in the midterms, the Senate map, very, very favorable for the Republicans. Of course, we all know 2 years out, it doesn't mean that much. The last thing I want to say in this, and then we can get to talking about the cabinet more specifically. We know that Kamala Harris ran a god-awful campaign. We know it now, a lot of the stories coming out. Less interesting to me, the stories, that she had $1 billion and she's ending in debt and where she spent the money. At a certain point, you get to a certain point, you have enough money that you're overspending just because you have to spend it down. Do I think that it's smart to pay Oprah $1 million? No. Do I think it's smart to spend $100,000 on a set for a podcast? No. But Stu is right when Stu said that if Kamala Harris would lose, the Democrats will be debating the sizes of the tables, because that's where they're holding now. The Democrats can't figure out which part they want to, of this debate they want to focus on.
I want to divide into 3 different topics. I want to talk about the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign. I want to talk about Trump's first 100 days. And then I want to talk about Jewish voters and some of the panel things. Let's kick it off right at the top with the Harris campaign and sort of segue from what Ellie was talking about. Let's kick it off. Let's start with Binyamin. Did she run a particularly bad campaign, or was it impossible for any Democrat to beat Trump in this election? Which was it?
I'm not sure that the campaign was so bad. It certainly wasn't impossible for a Democrat to beat Trump. We see the race really was close, maybe not in the Electoral College at the end, but even in all the swing states that Trump did win. And by the way, kudos to Eli for predicting a few weeks ago that Trump would win every single swing state. I had my doubts on 1 or 2 of them. The race really was fairly close. I think the candidate was weak. I don't think that the campaign was so terrible. I do think, though, that what really harmed Harris was those first few weeks after all of the joy and all of the hope and all of the hype out of the Democratic convention, that she waited weeks to give any kind of serious interviews. And then when she did, she fluffed a lot of them. Everyone talks about the phrase word salad, but it's really true. If you listen to some of the answers to her questions, she just talked and she didn't say anything specific or anything particularly lucid. I think the final analysis, that's what lost the race for her.
So Binyamin believes it's really the candidate at the end of the day, and there could have been Stu. I said for a long time that I've never seen a candidate in almost any election win with 100 days. It's unprecedented. So do you tend to agree with Binyamin that it's the candidate? Do you believe it's the time frame for the campaign? Do you believe another Democrat could have beaten Trump?
I believe that existentially, it is very hard for incumbents anywhere. I believe that immigration is a hard issue if there is a perception that the borders are open and people are coming here not playing by the same rules as everyone else and getting ahead. That is extremely dangerous.
Perception, Stu? Perception?
I'm being kind and saying there's a perception. The fact that Joe Biden took the action to close the border in June 3rd, I think it was, shows that there was in addition to all the problems that incumbents have everywhere, the border was a particular problem because it spoke against Bill Clinton's formulation of, we are here the people who work hard and play by the rules. That is a fundamental problem. I would also argue that, we all have nits to pick. I don't do this full time. I don't really do campaigns full time. When the Democrats talk about prescription drugs, they win houses of Congress. When the Democrats, we talked about a lot of things. We did not talk about $35 insulin all that much. It certainly didn't break through. We had the money to have it break through.
Ellie, 30 seconds also. Let's get, what do you think here? Which was it? Was it Harris, or was it just she's up against incumbency, she's up against an impossible scenario? And then maybe it's the Harris-Biden thing is impossible. Maybe if it would have been a Newsom or Whitmer or someone else, it would have been a different campaign.
The answer to your question is yes. It was the candidate, it was the campaign, it was, what's going on in the entire world. But make no mistake, it was a winnable race. It's not like Trump really is this juggernaut who couldn't have been knocked off. But at any point, you could turn to any single decision and say, oh, well, was this the decision that cost the race? Like Democrats are trying to do now. Like, oh, if Joe Biden would have decided not to run for re-election, then all would have been fine. No, all wouldn't have been fine. You still had
It would have been a messy primary.
It would have been a messy primary, and you would have
messy Democratic primary like we always do.
Bloodied each other up.
You can't keep people's attention more than 3 months. It should only be a 90-day race. Like in England.
We can get into this at a later point. The primary process needs to be reformed. But the point is, she did. Yes, she ran an awful campaign.
The very smart guy said to me on election night, the difference between a brilliant campaign and a not brilliant campaign. A brilliant campaign is the one that wins. And
yes.
It was a Rav who said it, an important customer Rav. Matter of fact, the most customer Rav of all the people on this podcast, Eli, is the one who said it to me. A brilliant campaign is a winning campaign, and a terrible campaign is a losing campaign.
And she ran an awful campaign.
Because she did not win.
She did not win, correct.
Let's move to Trump. He has 100 days, he has 200 days, he has 300 days, he has 50 days. How long does he have to enact the mandates and things like that he believes that he has? And that is currently, right now it is a sea change in terms of how he's being perceived in the media, how he's being talked about, etc. Stu, how long does he have before they start talking about the midterms already, and they say, hey, the Democratic Party is the opposition party now. How long does the Trump team have, do you think?
Well, the Yeoman was right when he pointed out how long it took Trump last time to appoint cabinet members. That was very quick by standards. I don't know if you have smicha or not. So I want to categorize that. Of me, Maury, and Eli, at least, Eli is the biggest rub here. But getting back, look, he's already putting points on the board and the game hasn't started. 100 days, it's not Thanksgiving. He will likely have a cabinet named, not even before Thanksgiving, but the week before Thanksgiving. Usually you don't have a cabinet members. The goal is to have a cabinet member before Thanksgiving. He is playing the clock well. He is ready.
Binyama, what do you think? You think you agree with Stu? You think that he has a lot of time here? You think that it starts to shift very quickly, and the scrutiny and the attention, and again, I tend to think he doesn't have as much time as Stu does with this. I agree he's playing the clock well right now, but I tend to think this shifts very quickly, and the Democrats pick themselves to back up and become the opposition party very quickly.
Trump has certainly broken out of the gate very quickly. There's no question about it. If this were a horse race, he would be several lengths ahead of the rest of the field, 1 furlong into the race. As far as transition is concerned, the 100 days that everybody talks about is overrated, because a smart transition has several plans. They have plans for day one, what the man's going to do at 12 o'clock when he enters the Oval Office after the swearing in is done. They'll have a plan for the first week, for the first 10 days, for the first month, for the first 2 months, for the first 100 days, then for the next 3 months after that. So there are multiple plans. The 100-day mark is a nice thing. That's the idea that, okay, so Congress will give a president a certain amount of grace during that period of time. I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think the public will give any politician any grace anymore. The politics in the U.S. is so polarized that I don't think they'll give them 1 minute or 1 hour's grace to do anything. So again, as I said a moment ago, if Trump is planning the transition right, he's got his day one plan, he's got his week one plan, month one plan, and we're going to see him rolling it out as quickly as he possibly can.
Eli?
Yeah, I think it's very different than 8 years ago, and very different from a traditional, obviously, very different than a traditional presidency. Trump has time. Trump, the clock is on his side now. He's using, like Stu said, the clock to his benefit, and he's, just pushing things out as quickly as possible. I think things are very different than they were in the past. Specifically, in the fact is he's not relying on other people to make any of these decisions for him. I think he's definitely listening to other people telling him who he should not pick. He's not outsourcing who he should pick. So that's why you're not ending up, let's say, with a Rex Tillerson, but you're ending up with people who he feels comfortable with. And if he made the decision, which he obviously did after his first, after the way his first term went, that he wants a cabinet of people that he wants around him, he's going to be much quicker to pull the trigger on who he wants. And that's very simple. The other thing that's very different is that last time around, if you remember, Trump was kind of the insurgent in the Republican Party. He came in, a lot of people in the Senate and even in the House were, not quite so sure how they're supposed to feel about this guy. That's not the case right now. Trump owns the party. He, whether we could talk about leaning into my designation as Rav here from Stu, we can debate whether or not this was a simon or a siba, or for those who want to know that's if it's causative or indicative. Trump has remade the party in his image, so the Senate is not going to hold up his picks. Benjamin referenced Pete Hegseth. He probably shouldn't, but he's not going to run into any trouble in the Senate.
That's a whole nother debate.
Right. But the last thing I want to say just about this, about the media picking up, is that the media hasn't learned the lesson of this election, which is that people don't, they're not going to be able to cause a moral panic anymore every time they throw their arms up and say, oh my gosh, this is what Trump is doing. It's crazy. We're all going to die. It's not happening anymore. They're going crazy about some of his picks. And people are just shrugging their shoulders and saying, no, that's what you say, Who is Jim Acosta anyway anymore?
All right, so I want to finish with the Jewish voters and the Jewish vote in general. I put in my column this week about this study that was done by a Democratic pollster that I've used previously We did exit polling on the day of the election and then the day after the election also. We specifically were looking at whether not the traditional exit polls, which look at all Jews across America. We were looking specifically at Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, which is a swing area, and the New York swing congressional district to see what happens if the Jewish community actually has a competitive races and how do they look at it, et cetera. And the polling was pretty conclusive that they voted for Harris at under 50%. They voted for Trump. So the difference is about 6 to 8 points depending on the state. But seemingly the Jewish vote is up for grabs. Now, it's also important to note that I got attacked immediately for doing it and people saying, well, you're from, and it's obviously you just got from voters. But that wasn't just a from voter poll. I mean, we released it. Like you could see it's across multiple parts of the Jewish community. And I think that it seems to me very clear that something has happened and something has shifted post October 7th. And there's a little bit no going back on that. I mean, we talked a lot about, if you tune into our election night coverage, we talked about what happened in Jackson, where like 90% of the community came out to vote. There's precinct data we have, which I'm sure Eli will share in other parts of the community. But again, not just in the Frum community, but beyond the Frum community, there's the way that people are turning out to vote. And they're also shifting their vote. They're saying, I'm going to vote in the Republican Party, or I'm very uncomfortable voting with parts of the Democratic Party. It seems like there's a sea change here. And I just wanted to point it out and talk about it briefly in just 30 seconds each and just get people's thoughts on this. Let's start with Eli, because I know he has the data, and then go to Binyamin and wrap it up with Stu here.
Yeah, I dug into Lakewood because I also wanted to find a significant sample from Jews and see what the numbers would tell us. And I sent it around last night to a few of my buddies involved in politics more nationally to see if they can get a read on like what they guess the number would be. Spoiler alert, everybody underestimated what the margin was. And you can understand that because in the 20 precincts with Rum Yidden, Trump won by 97% to 2%. The joke was, just paraphrasing an old Leno joke, we're investigating who the 500 people were who voted for Harris. But he won with on 22 and change thousand votes. He has a margin of over 21,000 votes. I mean, the Frum community has shown, I think what it is that when there's aligned values and aligned interests, we can vote a certain way.
I want to shift over to Binyamin, because I think we're going to agree that the Frum community shifts more to the right. Binyamin, I want to talk more about the Jewish community overall here and what we're seeing, because you looked at these numbers also, Binyamin.
I did look at the numbers, and I was impressed with the work that you did. And I think it's very important. And if it hasn't already been conveyed to Trump and the Trump team, it needs to be. One of the focuses that I've tried to work on for many elections here in Israel is to get a good read on exactly how many expats there are here in Israel. There's a lot of wild estimates out there, anywhere from 300,000 to 500,000 eligible voters. But there are no good statistics and no good follow-up. I've talked to a lot of people about this over the years, and it's something that really needs to be done. We really need to get exact numbers on the American expat community in Israel and their voting patterns. So if you know anyone who's willing to put that time and investment into Israel.
There you go, a call to action.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be done.
20 seconds more, Binyamin. Give us your final thoughts on this, and I want to turn over to Stu.
I'll just continue on what I was saying before, that just in my own circle, and I have wide circle, we've lived in a lot of places here in Eretz Israel. We have a lot of friends and relatives from all walks of life and from all states. And I would say that, if I had to take an informal poll, that I think that the people I know voted in the same proportion for Trump over Harris, like you saw in Lakewood. I think it's easily 90% for Trump.
Stu, final thoughts here. Reporters called me about it. I said to them that there was a clear erosion in the Democratic Party within the Jewish vote overall. What are your thoughts?
Binyamin talks about all walks of life. I also looked at your numbers. I've also worked with this pollster on Democratic campaigns, on Mike Bloomberg's campaign, a real Democratic pollster who previously worked for a leading Democratic firm before he branched out his own, almost all of his. I don't think he has any Republican clients. The numbers are stunning because it is not just from people. It is people who are concerned about Israel, concerned about anti-Semitism, concerned about their future. Third, fourth, fifth generation Democrats, people whose grandparents were FDR Democrats, whose parents were Kennedy Democrats, and who were Clinton Democrats, who are voting it. It's people who go to Sederim, who go to a Seder every Passover, but probably never say Havdalah because they don't keep Shabbos. It's not from people only. And the numbers really bear out how it also bears out, and maybe this should be our closing thought, our last thought collectively as a team before we broke for the election was the importance of Israel not being a one-party issue, of Jews not letting themselves be taken for granted by one party or the other. We all agreed, Eli agreed, that Israel cannot be a one-party issue and that we cannot let Jewish votes and pro-Israel votes be taken for granted by anyone. And you have proven that. Maura, you've proven that you cannot take it. You've proven it for the Democrats. The Republicans, which is not what I was talking about. I was talking about for the Republicans, not the Democrats. But you have proven that our votes matter. You have to listen to our issues. The issues that we've laid out in this podcast are the issues that decided elections in important states. So thank you for our voters. Thank you for our listeners. Thank you.
We'll close with that. I really think that we're very grateful for everyone who went out to vote. We're very grateful for everyone who paid attention to that. I think people have been buzzing in Eli's ear and Binyamin's ear and Stu's ear and my ear saying something happened within the Jewish community. The Jewish vote is an election like no other. So we're very grateful for all that. And we're very grateful to our Fourcast listeners. I want to thank you, our producer here. I want to thank you, Mishpacha. I want to thank our amazing co-hosts here. And I also want to thank Kol HaOlam for their amazing election night coverage and everything they did to make that possible. We had an unbelievable, unprecedented audience, tens of thousands of people watching it. So we're very excited about all that. As always, agree with us, disagree with us, have comments and thoughts, have opinions on the future, have opinions on 2028. Please email podcast@mishpacha.com. Again, podcast@mishpacha.com. And we will answer you live here on the program. Thank you.
You've been listening to Fourcast, an election season podcast from Mishpacha. As this season wraps up, thank you to the A-Team of Commentary, thank you to all listeners, and stay tuned for more political coverage in the pages of Mishpacha magazine.